Hello and welcome into Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I'm Dalton Shetler. That's Sam Sprunger back with another rousing edition of Big Talk. And, this is something we've been kind of chomping at for a while, been kind of staring at the calendar, counting the days, waiting till we got here. It is August, which means we have Big Ten football this month. We start with, was it Minnesota and Nebraska? I'll double check that. But I believe Minnesota and Nebraska kicks off the season August 31st. So that means we're getting ready to go, Sam.
Hey, it might be almost September before we get that, but it is still August. The calendar will still read 8, whatever, before. So on the kickoff time. So, yep, we're there.
And I have double checked it. It is Minnesota, Nebraska. So that's how the Big Ten football season starts. And certainly excited about that. So we're going to be talking a lot about the upcoming Big Ten football season. This is something that we've been wanting to kind of get into for a couple of weeks. Yes. But we kind of want to start going through what we see team by team and get us ready for the season. So,
well, technically we did start it. A couple weeks ago.
I didn't know if we wanted to fully
talked about it. Talked about it last week. So
good enough. Yeah, we've had some technical issues. They seem to be, fingers crossed, working for now and should be good to go.
You know what? We're flying on faith, my friend, because you know what? If it breaks down in the middle of the show again, people will never know. A and B, that's just what we'll deal with at the time.
Until we tell them a week later. Then
right. We'll just say no show this week, and then next week they'll find out because something else happened.
All right, so let's jump into Big Ten football. Well, let's start at the top too, because I don't think there's much else. There's conference realignment stuff, and we can get into some of that. Of course, we to update where we currently sit here on this Friday morning.
Still 14 teams right now.
Yeah, and Oregon and Washington still sit in the same spot they've been for the last year, where they've been pre-authorized by Big Ten university presidents. They check the boxes academically. All of that is still have to figure out the financial details because you have a TV contract in place, and I don't think that's going to be renewed or readdressed necessarily just because of the entrance of Oregon and Washington. So my point is you have to figure out the financials because Oregon and Washington might have to come at a discount like Maryland and Rutgers did in 2014. But
now, would it be one of those that it would be at a discount for a few years or a couple of years and then it expands out? Because don't they have the expansion clause written into the current media deal, right?
Correct. So that could end up being the case. We'll kind of see how it plays. But the big difference here is the Big Ten has been kind of sitting there saying, well, we don't want to be the ones to kill one of the Power 5 conferences.
After they already took USC and UCLA.
But they're sitting there saying, look, the Big 12 go, because the Big 12, we're expecting a deal to be done with Arizona, where Arizona is going to leave the Pac-12, move to the Big 12, following Colorado's footsteps from about a week ago. So the Pac-12 is starting to collapse and implode, and the Big 10 might be trying to grab a couple of those big fish on the way out. That's something maybe it's best talking about in a week, because I do want to get into some Big Ten football talk. I think
we'll probably have something solid next week, a little bit more solid, because the Arizona deal has been rumored. There's a lot of smoke with the Arizona going to the Big 12. Don't know if there's any, coattail runners with them. ASU going with them. I don't know yet. But those teams, may be done in a week. It may be by next Friday. We may have, a pretty strong idea. Are you winking at me, or is your contact still bugging you?
It is still my contact. I'm still working that out. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
But the point is that we understand there's this giant topic, but I think we're best served talking about Big Ten football for the upcoming season.
I agree, because next week it could be the whole show that we talk about this expansion of the Big 10 and Big 12.
Fair enough. All right, so let's start Big Ten football
again.
Without further delay, and we'll do this for more than a half hour, just breaking down Big Ten football here on this episode. So let's start in the East, because everybody usually thinks the East is the best. And honestly, data doesn't disagree. I mean, it's pretty evident the East is the best. It's not really just
science.
Yeah. But let's start at the Big Ten East, and we'll comb through a lot of this division. But let's go right to the top to begin with. Sam, as we get ready for 2023, you look at the top of the Big Ten East. Where do you land? Because as we know, Ohio State, Michigan. Here's also a great fact before you go ahead and start.
Go ahead.
Ohio State and Michigan. This just dawned on me right before we went live. They have been. One of those schools has been the Big Ten champion in football. The last time they weren't was 7 years ago in 2016.
Mm-hmm. Was
so
that when Michigan State won?
No, that's when Penn State won in 2016.
That's right. That's
Michigan
right.
State was
still
15.
didn't make the playoff.
Right. Correct. And then Ohio State won 4 in a row, 17, 18, 19, 20, and then Michigan won 21, 22. But it's been a while since we've had anybody that wasn't Ohio State or Michigan. That being said, considering it's a 14-team conference. But I want to ask you, do you go with one of those two powers to continue this theme, or do you go outside the box?
Yes. I go with one of those two.
The former. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the former, not the latter. Gosh. See, that's the difficult part because, Ohio State, they don't rebuild, they reload. Yes, they've lost 2 years in a row to Michigan, but they still just keep reloading. Now, they've got their question mark at their most important position, quarterback. But here's the thing: a graphic or a detail I saw. Ryan Day, all 4 starting quarterbacks that he's had during his tenure have been taken in the first round in the NFL draft.
Mm-hmm.
All 4 of them. So that tells you it doesn't matter if the first one was not his recruit, but it just what it's saying is he knows how to recruit that position. So while it is a question mark, and I think we've even when Tony was with us, we even talked about, does it really matter, or do you see a hiccup somewhere until you get to Michigan for Ohio State? It's kind of like last year with McCarthy. You weren't really sure about his potential until you got to Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're looking at the same style of thing this year, but just with the other team. And I still think it's crazy and silly that somebody is saying if Ohio State falls yet again to Michigan, Ryan Day needs to be fired.
Right.
Like that's a legit thing. Like they're like, we just can't have that. You're looking at John Cooper. John Cooper was not a failure.
Right.
He just couldn't beat Michigan. Now, don't get me wrong. That's a big feather. That's a big thing. Don't get me wrong. I understand that, but and maybe it's because of my allegiance, but if Purdue went, that record for 6 years and lost 4 out of 6 years to IU, I would be upset that we lost IU, but I'd be like, look, we just won 90% of our games during that time.
Yeah. Ryan Day's heading into year 5 and he's lost 2 Big Ten games.
Yeah. And they're saying that if he loses just one more to the same team, so if he goes undefeated and loses only 3 in his 4 years, he should be fired.
He's 31-2 against Big Ten teams. He's 45-6 overall. He's only ever lost 2 games in Columbus. Like, this is a dominant tenure, and I don't fully understand I get it from an outside, not really digging in, the John Cooper narrative, the parallel they're drawing there. But Ryan Day also got this team into the playoffs last year, even with the loss to Michigan, where had it not been for a missed field goal, they're playing for the national championship
against
game.
The team that beat Michigan.
Yes. I don't know exactly what we're doing here with this. I just don't see it as this is somebody who crumbles under big games. I think it's a false and really a lack of substance narrative. I think people are frustrated by the last 2 years, understandably so.
Sure, you want to beat your rival.
Lose to your rival.
You want to, but at the same time, it's almost seeming like they're saying a national championship, that's the icing on the cake. We don't care whether we win that. As long as we beat the team up north, we'll be happy. So, okay, go 1-11 and beat Michigan, and Ryan Day's okay. I would want both.
Yeah.
But I would ultimately want, excuse me, it would be, well, in football, it's different. You want the playoff, and then you want to beat your rival, I would think.
Yep.
But it's almost seeming like Ohio State's got it the other way, to where they would rather beat Michigan and then, oh, hey, if we make it to if we win in the playoffs, great. I don't know.
It just won it all. And you know what? I get it, being fans, totally get it. But again, you're looking at a coach who's 31-2 in your conference. You've got a lot. And it's just seldom that something just doesn't go perfect for Ohio State in the Ryan Day tenure. But
31-2. He's 29 games above 500 in conference play, and he's on the hot seat.
It's insane. But okay, so you said it's between Ohio State and Michigan. Did you pick one?
No. I hate doing this. I really do, because
I get it.
It's the lesser of evils, basically. Actually, I would honestly. I'm starting to crack out, aren't I?
You're back.
Okay. I'm gonna say Ohio State. I still think that they have. I mean, and Michigan's going to be really, really good. It's going to probably be another great Michigan Ohio State game. Last year, even though it was a large win by Michigan, it was still a great game until the fourth quarter. It just kind of Ohio State wore down. And you know what? Their defense was better last year than it was the year before that they played Michigan. So I can only think that they're going to improve even more. The question mark at quarterback, you know what? They don't. Like we said, the year before it was Michigan, or last year it was Michigan until they got to Ohio State. We weren't worried about it. I'm going to be the same way, and I'm going to think it's going to go the same way as it did last year, with the caveat of it's going to be the team Ohio State overcoming their quarterback question mark. So I think it's Ohio State.
So let's dig into the Buckeyes a little bit, because if we go by the Phil Steele group rankings, which is one of my favorite parts of the Phil Steele magazine, where he ranks each position unit in the country, Ohio State, when it comes to running backs, has the second best running back group in the nation, according to Phil Steele. With Mayan Williams, Travion Henderson is back, believe it or not. Receiving group, you could guess, number one in the country, between Marvin Harrison Jr.
Better be.
Abuka, like it's loaded. The number 8 offensive line in the nation. Switch to defense. The number 4 defensive line in the country. The number 8 linebacking core in the country, the number 12 defensive backfield in the nation. You go through all those positions, they rank top 12 in all of them. The one where it sticks out like a sore thumb, Sam talked about it, it's quarterback. Right now, Ohio State's quarterback group ranks 43rd in the country. That's where the question mark is. We still don't have a starter named. A lot of signs point to Kyle McCord, who saw a little bit of action last year. But that's what's going to be really interesting, is if a quarterback steps in, because it's been a while since we've seen suspect quarterback play at Ohio State. You go through C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields, Dwayne Haskins, J.T. Barrett. Like, you go through this list. Cardale Jones had a moment there at Ohio State. Like, it's really a full loaded list. If Kyle McCord can step up and be the next wave of that wrinkle, Ohio State's loaded enough, not just to win the Big Ten, but to win it all.
Yeah, I agree. It's and you just ran through everything I saw, and I was trying to find the graphic while you were talking. They I forget who it was, posted that it was the top quarterbacks in the country, and it kind of surprised me a little bit, because it ticks me off. Ohio State was had the 20-something best quarterback on the list, and that you're not used to seeing that, especially the past 3 years, because they just have had studs at the quarterback. But here's the thing, I think that's just the unknown part. You just don't know whether he's there yet or not. Not all are going to be home runs, but at the same point, when you've got those high ranked when you have the best receiver core, that's going to make your quarterback better. So eventually maybe he's going to step in and be a little bit, granted, he only played a little bit last year, but he didn't need to. JT Barrett was there and he was fine, and
CJ Stroud.
CJ Stroud, sorry. Not it's the two letter thing that got me. That's what I meant, was Stroud was there and you didn't need him. So I think he's going to be just fine, and he's going to have the weapons around him that are going to help any of those shortcomings that he might have.
Well, let's take a look at the case for the Wolverines. Michigan, back-to-back Big Ten champs. They've knocked Ohio State off in back-to-back years for the first time since 99 and 2000. It's been a minute, but Michigan is having a moment. If we take a look at the Wolverines in the case for them, let's go through those Phil Steele rankings once more, right?
Yes, let's do that.
Let's take a look at some of the positions. At running back, number one in the country. They love the backfield of Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, and why not? I mean, Blake Corum was the Big Ten running back of the year last year, had a phenomenal season, ran for almost 1,500 yards and 18 touchdowns. This unanimous first-team All-American. The receiving core, not quite as strong, ranked 39th in the nation, but the offensive line, second best offensive line in the country. The last 2 years where they've had this recent success, Michigan has won the Joe Moore Award, which goes to the nation's best offensive line each year. Michigan's the first school ever to win that award in back-to-back years. That has never happened before, but that goes to show what they have cooking there in Ann Arbor. And you put Blake Corum behind that, and that leads to a lot of that success. We'll flip over to defense real quick before we get Sam jumping in. The defensive line, sixth best in the country, according to Phil Steele. Linebacking core, fifth best. Defensive backfield, seventh best in the nation. But again, quarterbacks, this isn't such a spot quite amplified like it was for Ohio State. But Phil Steele has the J.J. McCarthy unit ranked 18th best in the country. So that's kind of the case for Michigan. It's a lot of power up front, winning in the trenches, both sides of the football and playing from there. Kind of just, Sam, Jim Harbaugh football. The same thing we saw with the 49ers, same thing we saw with his success at Stanford. It's finally rolling in Ann Arbor.
He's finally gotten to the point where he's producing a winner that people are happy with. He was kind of on the other, he was on the Michigan side of can win a lot of games, but not win the big game. And then
9-3 each year.
Yeah. Something that Purdue, now granted, I'm talking about Purdue would be ecstatic with every year. Joe Tiller pretty much did that every year that he was at Purdue, and I was a happy guy. But different history, and you got different expectations, but
and resources.
And resources. But at the same time, he's won everywhere he's gone, and that should be an understanding that eventually you're going to get over that hump. And as long as he doesn't buy cheeseburgers for people, he should be all right. But no, I think Michigan is going to probably run into the same thing that they ran into last year. They're going to have the same, some close games. They're going to win them. And then it's going to all kind of come down to the Saturday after Thanksgiving and whether or not they're at home this year, aren't they? They're at the Big House this year against Ohio State. Can they make it 2 in a row? And I don't know.
3 in a row, 3 wins.
Well, 2 in a row at the Big House.
At the Big House, yes, correct.
Sorry, I didn't preface that. At home, 2 straight times at home, taking down the hated Ohio State Buckeyes, and but I don't know. Honestly, it's a coin flip for me, and I just took the other side of the coin for Michigan, Ohio State. I mean,
nope.
They both just reloaded. They didn't rebuild anything. They didn't have to. They don't have to. And I love Michigan's running backs, and that you mentioned that Ohio State had the second best, and I'm sitting there thinking it has to be Michigan's number one, has to, and which says a lot about the conference and probably why there was it was a little bit more of a struggle in the playoff. The Big Ten has the best running backs in the nation, but that doesn't necessarily correlate to winning the whole thing. But Ohio State has the number one receivers; those matter. Now the quarterback may be a thing to where it bites them, but it's going to be Michigan or Ohio State coming out of the Big Ten. And I honestly, with the way it played out last year, it very well easily could be the same thing where they both get in. Still,
yeah, could be. Well, and so we head into the year, and the consensus seems to be, well, let's get to November 25th. Let's see that game in Ann Arbor. Yeah. We'll see who moves on between Michigan and Ohio State. The thing that I think could absolutely ripple this picture that we have heading into the year sits in Happy Valley. Penn State comes into this year coming off of an 11-2 season. And what's fascinating about this, if we look at Penn State, the only two losses they had were to Michigan and Ohio State. And you might remember Penn State was in a battle with Ohio State and then just imploded in that fourth quarter. But if we take a look at Penn State, and bear with me here on the positional rankings, I want to start on defense. Tell me how impressive and talent stocked the Nittany Lions are. Here's their defensive position rankings. The third best defensive line in the country, according to Phil Steele. The fourth best linebacking core in the nation, according to Phil Steele. The number one defensive backfield in the nation. That all sits with Penn State. Every single unit is top 4 in the country, according to Phil Steele, from what Penn State has. That tells you a lot about what they have there just on that side. But let's flip to offense, because we talked about running back groups 1 and 2 in the country. How about number 3 being Penn State with Nicholas Singleton coming back? So Penn State has a nice running game, running behind the 14th best offensive line in the country. Now, here's the only other dimension that needs to break through expectations for Penn State to absolutely flip the Big Ten upside down and get into that championship game, passing Ohio State and Michigan. It's the passing game. Right now, the quarterback unit ranks 54th in the country. Of course, we know the days of Sean Clifford are now behind us. After 35 years, he's been taking snaps in Beaver Stadium. Yeah. And Drew Aller, who many Penn State fans have been clamoring for last year as a freshman, enters his sophomore season and appears to be the guy. Can Drew Aller lead Penn State back to glory? And he's thrown to the 34th best receiving unit in the country. So that's maybe where the question mark is just the passing game as a whole for Penn State. But that defense from top to bottom is maybe stronger than any other in the conference.
Well, I would say it probably, I mean, if that's their rankings according to Phil Steele, you're right. Happy Valley may throw a wrench into all of this because, depending on certain things, they might trip one of those two up and then the other one wins the rivalry game. And then we've got a 3-way tie and we've got to figure out, whatever the tiebreakers are or whatever. And I think they probably go into divisional record first, then after that they go elsewhere. But if it works out the way, they're all 3 in the same division, so like they all 3 would have one loss if Penn Penn State does lose to one of them, beats the other, and then they have a But you're right. And you know what, I hope, let's say I don't ever hope, well, yeah, I do. I hope it does turn into that, because it makes for one heck of an exciting season, because you're like, hey, because no matter how much of a dumpster fire that West was last year, it was still exciting and fun to watch to see which one played out and came out of it.
Yep.
Came out of it. And so like, while we were kind of making light of how the West was just kind of, can't get out of its own way or whatever, it made for an interesting culmination of the season. I mean, we were paying attention to Iowa, Nebraska last year. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Iowa couldn't score points to do anything, to save themselves, they were still in the hunt. And Nebraska, we all know what Nebraska turned into last year. It was fun. So I think, watching a Rutgers Penn State game, because it matters, it makes a better football season, in my opinion, period.
Well, I think you nailed it, and I think you touched on maybe the danger the Big Ten is in, and I say danger. It's not code red. I mean, there aren't alarms being signed off, but
on one.
Yeah, right. I think the idea of predictable outcomes, where you already know what's going to happen with the football season. Like if we go through this year and it's just Ohio State and Michigan rolling through everybody and then playing in that final game, I mean, a lot of people, if it plays out that way, they'll say, see, I just needed to tune in November 25th. And that's a problem for the sport. Yeah. You're right. The West Division isn't nearly as talented, isn't as successful as the East Division in so many different ways. But the West gets me to watch, because I have no idea what's going to happen.
Whether we still don't really have a clear-cut picture of what it's going to look like this year either.
Whether it be self-harm or somebody else stepping up. Like the West Division is entertainment because you have no idea what's going to happen. And the East Division needs a little bit of a surprise factor to it. And maybe Penn State could be that since we're so conditioned to either seeing Ohio State or Michigan just win it all for the last 6-7 years. We'll finish out this East Division here real quick because we hit on the top three. The media preseason poll has those as the top three, but then number 4, Maryland. The Terps getting some respect. Talia Tagovailoa is back in College Park. Sam, are you buying stock in the Maryland Terrapins?
I'll buy him as 4th best in the East, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, because they do have a lot of their stuff from last year returning. And if we remember, they played Ohio State pretty hard and pretty tough. If it weren't for a late injury to Tagovailoa, or whatever. If they had a shot to potentially win that game, or at least get down and get in a position to at least put it in a lot closer than it was, but turned into 2-possession or 2-score game, and that's the way it ended. But yeah, I would say that they're definitely something to look at. I mean, they don't have. I mean, Viola, whatever.
We'll work on that. We'll see it in the mirror.
I'll work on it. Had 3,000 yards passing. And he can only get better, I think. He lost some weapons, but you know what? He's still a very talented quarterback, and he can throw the ball around, and it's their defense isn't the worst. It improved last year from years prior. So you can only think that, I would say 4 in the East is probably a really good placement for them. I don't see that being we're going to, they may trip up Penn State. They may trip up, one of the, I don't think they're better than 4th in the division though.
And no argument here. I think it's about right. Let's move to number 5. Number 5 is the school that's all over my hat, my shirt. Michigan State picked 5th, correct. Picked 5th in the East Division. Michigan State coming back from a year where they went 5-7 in the previous season, which you go back 2 years, Michigan State was 11-2. So it's been a bit of an up and down in the last couple of years as Mel Tucker gets ready to head into year 4 in East Lansing. But for Michigan State, and we could spend an hour on this because I've dug into it so much in the past. But for Michigan State, I think there are a couple of different question marks and a couple of other really strong points of emphasis. The front 7 for Michigan State, strong. That is going to be the calling card this year. The linebacking unit is 13th in the country, according to Phil Steele. Really like what they got with the linebackers, with Darius Snow coming back. Cal Halliday was just put on the Nagurski Award watch list. Aaron Brule is back. They are loaded at linebacker. Jacoby Windman comes back, and that up front gets really, really strong. The secondary still has some question marks, but the biggest ones to me is on offense because Peyton Thorne is gone. So there's going to be a new starting quarterback for the first time in a few years now in East Lansing. A lot of the conversations between Noah Kim, Caton Hauser, it seems like momentum's with Kim. We'll see who ends up officially being that starter. But then you also have some questions of who's going to be the playmakers in the green and white, because last couple of years, last year, there were 2 NFL caliber receivers on that roster. Jaden Reed, who now plays with the Green Bay Packers, and then Keon Coleman is certainly an NFL talent, but transferred to Florida State. So who's going to step up in that receiving room? A lot of expectations around Trey Mosley to now become the guy. He's had a great career, but to take even a couple steps higher. Running back unit, Jalen Berger's back. They bring in Nathan Carter, a transfer from UConn, trying to shore up that running game and get it back to at least a glimpse of what it was in 21 with Kenneth Walker III. And maybe
get back to that though.
No, that's why a glimpse. A glimpse was the right way to put it. But maybe the biggest thing to help with that is the offensive line. I was talking with Mel Tucker last week at the Big Ten Football Media Days, and we were talking a little bit about the offensive line depth. There were 19 linemen listed on the spring football roster. Just to give you an idea of why that's a big deal, last year or the last couple of years, he said there were 5 offensive linemen, and they had to take 2 defensive end walk-ons and flip them to the offensive line just to give them a little bit of depth to practice with. There has been 0 depth on that offensive line for a couple of years now, and Michigan State now has some depth. And as Mel said to me, he said last year he looked out sometimes on the field and said, we're just not a big football team. Like we just don't have size. And he shot a look across the table and said, that's not going to be a problem anymore. So Michigan State has beefed up. What does that mean for 2023?
Well, I just know that they've got to be more productive on the offense, especially during the conference, because they averaged under 20 points a game during conference play and gave up over 30. So like that doesn't bode well for when you get into the conference season. You can't have an 11-point deficit and hope to be successful. Now, granted, they're preseason. What are they called? Just non-conference games, I guess would be. Yeah, they did just fine because they were a little bit lower of a level of competition. Maybe, their strong points were blown up, and I remember after the first couple of weeks, we were wondering if they were going to compete with Ohio State and Michigan because of, of the dominance that they'd had against those teams that they played. But they got into conference play, and we saw how that worked out. So their big thing is trying to find their receivers that can replace the Coleman and Reed. And, I wish Reed as well as I can in Green Bay. Hopefully he does very well. Hopefully he does well, but Green Bay loses as many games as possible. But no love for Green Bay. See what I did there? But anyways, they've got a big uphill battle. But you know what? We also know that they've rebuilt to where they should be better. I mean, they should be better. Could they finish 4th? I think they could. Again, they probably got the 5th. The preseason 5th spot in the East simply because we don't know yet. We don't know what those pieces are going to produce, and they could produce well enough to where they're competing with Penn State for 3rd even. But I would say this is a safe place to put him or put them.
I think it's going to be interesting too, because you talked about like early in that non-conference last year, we thought, wow, maybe Michigan State's really going to do some pretty special things. And then I think the last non-conference game, the trip to Washington, is when we were like, we need to dial back some expectations of what this team is going to be. And for this year, they host Central Michigan to start things off September 1st. Then they host Richmond, and then they host Washington again. It's the 3rd toughest schedule in the country, according to Phil Steele, what Michigan State has in front of them for this upcoming year. So I think it's going to be fascinating. And the last tidbit I'll leave here before we close the book on Spartans, Michigan State, through the first 8 games last year, had created 11 turnovers. In the final 4 games, Michigan State created 1 turnover in the last 4 games. Now, the 8th game was the Michigan game, and we know after that were some suspensions. So Michigan State was without some players like Jacoby Windman, who in those 8 games to begin the year had 1 interception, 6 forced fumbles, and a fumble recovery by himself.
Right.
He's back. Let's see what Michigan State's defense can do and create. So
we were talking about him potentially being, a defensive player of the year candidate after what he had been doing. And then it kind of, hit that wall, and, he was a monster last year. If he can replicate that to a certain extent, if not exceed it, maybe it could be a lot better season for Michigan State than what it's being predicted right now.
Yep. I agree. And I do want to get to the West Division. We spent a lot of time so far in the East, so I'll round out the media preseason poll has Rutgers 6, Indiana 7.
Right where they need to be.
Spoken from a Boilermaker. But Rutgers at 6. I think Greg Schiano is going to be able to get the Scarlet Knights to get maybe a game or two in there where maybe they shouldn't win. They're paying playing pretty gritty. For IU, the question is, can Tom Allen keep his job after this year? And it hurts me to say that. I know you're a Purdue fan, so opinions might be biased. I was going to say, but Tom Allen is just salt of the earth kind of guy. So really kind of personally pulling for the Hoosiers to win some games, because I think Tom Allen, especially with the resources he's been given in Bloomington, I mean, come on. Like, he's doing a lot of good there. But let's go ahead and flip to the West Division.
Yes, sir.
Who do you like, before I show who the media preseason poll has, who wins the West according to Sam Sprunger? This is one of our funnest questions every year.
Well, and this was what we were talking about when my computer died in the middle of our last episode 2 weeks ago. I really like Wisconsin. It's one of those that when the Badgers have a down year, you don't look to see, oh goodness, what's wrong? Is this an issue in the middle? You know, are they going to go, into a time where they're just not as good? That's not Wisconsin anymore.
Right.
That's your grandfather's Wisconsin. That's a dumpster fire year in and year out. One of the reasons why I'm guessing that they got rid of Paul Christ is they wanted somebody that was going to, be able to rebuild and take them back to what we're used to seeing Wisconsin as. And I think Luke Fickell is a home run. And yes, he hasn't coached. Well, he's coached one game, but he hasn't coached a game of matter at Wisconsin. But you know what? He's got the track record at Cincinnati. He's got the track record of being a coach that is takes what he's got and turns it into better, or to big good results. So I think Wisconsin, with what they have, because they didn't have an empty cupboard last year. They just had underperformance last year.
Right.
I don't think that happens 2 years in a row. And I think they've got a coach that's going to, magnify what they do well and improve on what they're struggling on. And they're just going to be a solid unit. I don't think they will win the Big Ten championship game, but I think they could make it very interesting for whoever they play.
So, and this is what's really interesting to me is, I mean, you highlighted some of Luke Fickell's success. I mean, it feels like every coach that came to Cincinnati for the past decade and a half just kind of kept raising the bar a little bit. And then Fickell just exploded it into the college football playoffs, which Cincinnati's in the college football playoffs? Like, it's insane. Right. So Fickell's known to have a lot of success. Wisconsin, they do bring back quite the backfield. We talk about the Phil Steele position rankings. Phil Steele has the Wisconsin Badger backs 5th best in the country, because Braylon Allen is back, and is Ches Malusi. I mean, that's a heck of a 1-2 punch they got in Wisconsin. But I think one of the most fascinating things, and I think for some listeners that don't keep up with the transfer portal every single day, which I understand, there's a lot happening. If you're not aware,
just come to us, because Dalton does.
Yeah, pretty much. If you're not aware, there's a new quarterback in Madison, Wisconsin by the name of Tanner Mordecai. He transferred in from SMU, and listen to some of these numbers. He last year went 288 for 443 passing, had more than 3,500 passing yards, had 33 passing touchdowns, and 10 picks. He ranked first in SMU program history in passing touchdowns, where he had 72, third in passing yards, where he had more than 7,100. And in last year's game against Houston, he threw for 9 touchdowns in a game and ran 1 in. He had 7 passing touchdowns in the first half, which tied the NCAA record. Just a couple extra tidbits on Tanner Mordecai. But this is somebody who could change the game for Wisconsin and maybe make them a little bit more multi-dimensional, because I think that's been one of the knocks is, even with some decent talent coming through Wisconsin. I mean, we saw Jack Cohn come into Wisconsin, transfer out to Notre Dame, where he had mild success. Like, we've seen there's been okay quarterback play. Graham Mertz has transferred to Florida. Interesting to see what he can do down in Gainesville this upcoming year. But to have somebody who might be able to make Wisconsin not just a run offense, that will be fascinating to watch. Now, my question to you, Sam, does it get better, or is that better? And you've already answered yes, it is, than what Iowa has going on, because the media preseason poll has voted Wisconsin with 233 points. Iowa comes in at 232. It is a thin margin between the two, according to the media. And let me set the groundwork here. For Iowa, of course, we know all the jokes. We know the story of last year.
There's
they just couldn't score.
in Iowa.
Yeah, right. Like, I mean, they've all been written at this point. But it was an elite defense. And this upcoming year, they bring back some of those great defensive playmakers. Cooper DeJean comes back. But you take a look at the offense, and transferring in comes Cade McNamara from Michigan and Eric All from Michigan, a quarterback tight end combo. And the question is, will the Brian Ferentz system actually be able to work if you just plug and play, insert some new faces? Or is the problem the system? And that's what we're about to find out.
Well, I honestly think if they were, I think it's a couple of things. I think McNamara and, that boost in the offense, because you know what? It was the offense that was the issue with Iowa. We all know that. Like you said, we made all the jokes. Still, if you don't have somebody calling the plays right, doesn't matter. You could have, Hall of Famers sitting there that they can only do so much. They can try, they can do it, but if you don't, I think Ferentz having the contract restructuring of he has to average a certain amount of points, I think that's going to help more. And don't get me wrong, all the additions and what they've got on their offense potentially, they're there. But if you've got somebody that's motivated to make the right play calls, go after some things and stuff like that, yeah, I think it's going to look even better for them. So I think it's going to be improved with what they had if they went with just the way they called the offense the past 2 years prior. But I think with the motivation of, hey, if you don't produce, you're not coming back next year. That might be the motivation even more that Iowa needs to open the offense up a little bit more. That 9-6 loss to Illinois is not going to happen.
Yeah, it's really going to be interesting, and I think the West is going to be a lot of fun because of it. And if we keep going through the West, media preseason poll at number 3 has Minnesota. That one surprised me a little bit, but the Gophers come in at number 3, Illinois at number 4. Any argument there?
I don't. You know what? I don't know. Yeah, Minnesota. I've always liked Minnesota. I kind of like, they're not my favorite, they're not my second favorite either. They're just, I've always kind of, when they're playing big teams, I hope they trip them up, or whatever. So I've always kind of liked them. I don't know that they can, their quarterback's name. Whew, I don't know how to pronounce that.
I need to so PJ Fleck and a couple of Gophers told it to me, and I already forgot it. So I need to learn that one. But Ethan is the first name. Let's go with Ethan for
Ethan now. K. But he, they look to the hope that he's going to be, better than, was it Tanner Morgan, who was there for 18 years prior.
Correct.
Long running quarterback there in Minnesota. But I think here's the thing. They have Michigan and Ohio State in their crossovers.
Yep.
So those aren't going to bode well for him or for them. Now, don't get me wrong. They could win one of those. I don't know. Anything's possible, but it just, those crossovers, like, Wisconsin doesn't have Michigan or Penn State in their crossovers. They have Ohio State, but they're at home with them, and they play Iowa at home. So those are two big things in their way, but they at least have to, they can tackle them at home. Minnesota's got to play Michigan and then go to Ohio State. I don't know that that's going to bode well for them, but I wouldn't say third is a bad place for them. I just don't know enough about what they've got coming back to say, yeah, I'm strongly comfortable with that.
Well, and this is what's interesting to me, because I believe in saying that Minnesota is third and putting Illinois fourth, the belief now is some people are kind of speculating or suspecting that Illinois didn't build something sustainable last year. Because if you look at what Illinois had last year, defensively, the number 1 scoring defense in the country, allowing just 12.8 points per game, 3rd best total defense in yards, 8th best pass defense in the country, 10th best rush defense in the country. Obviously,
minus one defensive coordinator now, though.
Correct. Yes. No. And that's the thing. Like, so Walters heads to Purdue. Can Bielema keep this thing rolling on the defensive side of the ball in the future? Because they did lose a top 5 draft pick in that secondary with Witherspoon being gone.
Yeah.
They lose the Brown brothers for this upcoming year. Sidney Brown there in the secondary. Chase Brown was the running back. So there are holes to fill, but I don't know. There's something about the momentum happening there in Champaign that gets me to believe that it is sustainable.
Well, maybe it's one of those that it's they're thinking, yeah, they could have something sustainable, but since they did lose their defensive coordinator, we're going to put them at 4 conservatively, and they could be higher up. They could maybe be 3rd, 2nd, maybe competing with Wisconsin for the championship. But right now, as it stands with that unknown again. That unknown is, okay, we don't know whether or not the defense is, is it sustainable? And is it able to, can you plug another defensive coordinator in and keep it going for what they've got? And maybe that's why they've got them conservatively at 4. And that's what it is. It's not we don't believe in them. It's we're not sure because they only had 1 year at that height.
Which I feel like the we're not sure can be applied to every single West Division team. I guess that's why I'm curious.
Yeah, because you go down to number 6. I've seen a lot of good.
Oh, hang on before you get to number 6.
Sorry.
Don't jump too far ahead because let's go to number 5 real quick.
And we'll yell at me. You hurt my feelings.
We're gonna go no huddle here. Number 5 in the media preseason poll, Nebraska. Matt Rule comes in first year in Lincoln. Mm-hmm. Can he turn things around for the Huskers that quickly?
Yeah, he could. I like Matt Rule. He was good at Baylor. He was good at Baylor. He did a lot of good things in Baylor. And after the whole dumpster fire that they turned into, he came in and turned it back into a respectable, program. And
he did that at Temple.
Yeah, and he did that at Temple. Which is why Baylor brought him in, they had an issue and a situation that they needed it turned around, and he did just that. And so, he's got a track record of coming into the not so ideal program and still performing and getting results out of who he's got and who he brings in. So I think they could. Do I think he's going to win the West this year? No, I don't. Could it happen? Sure, it's the West, but I think he's setting Nebraska up to the point where once USC and UCLA get in there and we start the big conference play, to where it's just all one big conference, they could definitely be in the top third, year in and year out. And I think and maybe a couple of years, maybe getting up into the top spots competing to play in the Big Ten championship. I really do like Matt Rule. And I think he could do some good things. And he has the experience of dealing with players who make a lot of money by going to Carolina and playing. So he's not coming into, the college game after being out for a few years and being, all of a sudden we've got to deal with, he's dealing with kids that are making money. So, he can kind of maybe quell that and have that, okay, I know you're making a lot of money, but during this time, it's our time, it's football time. And maybe that's a sustainable thing for them. So I would say 5 is a good spot for them.
I don't disagree. And by the way, just a note heading into the year, they bring in a transfer quarterback, Jeff Sims, who transfers in from Georgia Tech. That's somebody to pay attention to as we get the year kicked off. In Lincoln, Nebraska. Number 6. This is what Sam wanted to get to. And by the way, we've went through 5 teams. None of them played in Indianapolis last year for the Big Ten championship game.
No, they didn't.
The 6th team did, though. It's the black and gold from West Lafayette, the Purdue Boilermakers.
Black. Thank you.
Wow, that was just about the most pretentious Big Ten fan thing possible, next to the Ohio State. Like that was pretty good. But let's take a look at Purdue as Ryan Walters enters year 1 there in West Lafayette. What do you think of the Boilermakers?
That same list we were talking just a little bit ago about. I forget who put it out, and I cannot find it on my phone. They rated the top. I think it was the top 40 quarterbacks in the country, and Hudson Card was 6th. So I think, but he was in the top 10, but he was at least flirting with that top 10. And he was the top rated quarterback in the Big Ten behind McCarthy. So to me, that says they're expecting good things from Hudson Card. I think that's a big reason why Purdue's so low in the preseason ranking is Aiden O'Connell is one of the most prolific passers in Purdue history.
Yep.
And he's not any longer there. And now you're trying to replace one of the most prolific. He's the Kyle Orton to Drew Brees. He's the same that he's the one replacing the great. And Aiden O'Connell is a great in Purdue history. But I think Hudson Card could be a really strong and productive player. And if you remember, which I'm sure you don't, Dalton, Kyle Orton got Purdue to 5th in the country.
Yep.
So, I mean, it is possible to have some good production. It wasn't expected, but that's where Purdue got. I think, excuse me, I think with Devin Mockabee coming back, that's one heck of a running back to have as your key back. Hudson Card's going to be doing some good things, I think. So I get why they're number 6, but I personally think that's too low.
And by the way, if the name Hudson Card, you're sitting there as a listener, and you're like, where have I heard that before?
Yeah.
He transferred in from Texas, but you might remember in that weird game between Texas and Alabama last year where it was kind of coming down to the wire, and a lot of Alabama fans were getting a little nervous early in the season.
As they should have.
Texas quarterback, I believe it was Quinn Ewers at the time, who got hurt, and Hudson Card came in as his replacement. Last play, I believe, of the first quarter, and Card came in and went 14 of 22 for 158 yards against Alabama, filling in. So he was the guy that kept Texas afloat against Alabama. That's what Purdue has back there.
And the only reason he transferred out was because Arch Manning was coming to Texas. And
Ewers is still there. Texas's quarterback room is so ridiculous.
So he saw it as a reason for him to get out and go to a place that he could be the starter. And Ryan Walters made it a point. That's the quarterback we want. He went after him, and they got him in West Lafayette. So that unknown of not knowing whether or not he can replicate that over and over again, that's still there because he hasn't had the opportunity to do it. But if he does, Purdue's going to be a lot better than what they were anticipated to be.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And then finishing out the media preseason poll, 7th, and honestly, I don't really have anything to say. Northwestern. I think this is going to be a very difficult season for so many reasons. I don't expect really anything in terms of productivity from Evanston this upcoming year.
Well, and without getting in anything, when you lose your coach that close to the season, it's always going to be a tough situation. So I think we're going to look at this being a Northwestern from when I was growing up, where they would be lucky to win one game in the year. So it's going to be a very difficult year for the Wildcats in purple.
Well, I suppose, that just about concludes, at least for now. We'll be talking Big Ten football leading up and into the season. So we have plenty of Big Ten football still to come. But that's kind of our preseason breakdown as of now and where we sit. But Sam, go ahead, close out this edition of Big Talk by letting the fine folks know where they can find us.
Yes, sir. Well, I see that I have neglected the graphic in multiple places. You can find us on the TikToks, the Instagram, and the platform formerly known as Twitter at B1G_talk. That's Big Talk, B1G_talk. That's a 1, not an I, Dalton. I know you're struggling with your context, but that is a 1, not an I. Yes. And then go to Facebook, B1G Big Talk. Don't go to all Big Talk. That's not us. It's Big Talk, just the 2 words, not all, because that's a completely different thing. So once the football season kicks off here in a couple of weeks, or we get a little bit closer, we'll start going to twice a week for streaming on ASAP. If you don't find our stream on ASAP and still want to watch these 2 beautiful faces in the morning talk some Big Ten sports, you can go to Spotify and find our video stream there. If you just want to listen to us talk, anywhere you find podcasts.
All right. So that'll close us out. Big Ten football preview. Thank you all so much for tuning in and joining us. We really do appreciate it. And for Sam Sprunger, I'm Dalton Shetler. Until next time, so long.
See ya.